Open source isn't just a movement anymore. It has become the backbone of innovation. It's shaping industries, influencing policies, and even redefining how companies approach new technologies like AI. The Linux Foundation's research team has been publishing reports after reports to track these shifts, all the way from Europe's growing role in open source to the rise of sovereign AI and the business realities of commercial open source. And today we have with us once again Hilary Carter, Senior Vice President of Research at the Linux Foundation, to walk us through the latest findings and what they really mean for developers, enterprises, and governments worldwide. Hilary, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Swap. It's great to be here.
It's my pleasure. Can you give us a quick summary of the recent reports your team has published, and then we'll go through them one by one?
Sounds great. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be with you to talk about research at the Linux Foundation. We've had an incredibly busy year. At Open Source Summit Europe in Amsterdam at the end of August, we reached a milestone of having 16 reports published this calendar year and a whole host more to come. We'll probably publish as many as 26 by the time the year is through. And a lot of those reports are driving decision-making for our communities, adding value, and they were really well received. Specifically in September, we published our 2025 State of the OSPO report with the To-Do group, a Europe-focused report with LF Europe and Canonical, a new report on the state of commercial open source, and another report on a sovereign AI in partnership with LF AI and Data and FutureWay. I should also say that the state of commercial open source was in partnership with two new groups that we're working with, the Commercial Open Source Software Alliance and Serena, a venture capital firm that is based in Europe. So lots of great content out there, Swap. Honestly, don't know where to begin.
Since we recently had Open Source Summit Europe, let's start there. Can you talk about the Europe-focused report and how it connects with AI, which was a major theme at the event itself?
Yeah, so the first report we did for Europe was in 2022 when we launched Linux Foundation Europe in Dublin. So what's really exciting is here we are, 2023, 2024, 2025, 4 years on, to see the change in the narrative of how open source is viewed in Europe today versus where we were 4 years ago when we first did an empirical study on Europe. And I will say it's incredibly gratifying to see a renewed interest in open source across different stakeholders in Europe, primarily the public sector. When we compare that to 2022, one of the greatest gaps was in public sector awareness and adoption of open source. Today, we're seeing a very different landscape where we have dedicated funding from Germany's Sovereign Tech Agency. We have a narrative that is moving beyond the kind of romanticism, community, feel-good contribution of open source as was revealed in 2022 with the view that open source is concertedly a strategic priority for European innovation and competitiveness. And it's taken very seriously as the accelerator to European economic growth and success. So that's a really nice way to bookend the Europe study of 2025 with the first study we did in 2022 and seeing how year over year, the value of open source continues to be strong. Industries are adopting it and contributing back and seeing that value. So we were excited to be able to bring those results forward. As well, we, as part of the Europe study, we interviewed approximately a dozen subject matter experts from European stakeholder groups, enterprise government, NGOs, to bring their experiences and their practitioner perspectives into the research and to really tell that kind of human story so that people see themselves in through their open source journeys too.
Europe is known for being the birthplace of many major open source projects, including the Linux kernel, MySQL, Python, Raspberry Pi, Arduino. The list goes on and on. A lot of grassroots level work is going on there. On the US side, we have seen major commercial players like Red Hat, Google, Microsoft, AWS. They are involved with open source. In Europe, what kind of involvement are you seeing from private companies? Are they becoming more actively involved in open source? And did your research reveal any contrast there?
That's a great question. I have seen consistent engagement across leading European industries. You mentioned energy, and I will give top marks to the big energy players in Europe for their leadership, recognizing the transformative potential of open source software as it relates to optimization of the grid, onboarding renewables, managing supply and demand, and implementing the electrification of our world. That is without question a very, very strong position for European industry. I've also seen incredible engagement among the automotive community in Europe, Mercedes-Benz being a great example. Also, in terms of European industry in the embedded space and the networking space, companies like Bosch, companies like Orange in telecommunications, really stepping up and engaging across open source project communities like, of course, LF Europe for being a local forum for European industry to convene and share ideas and knowledge, but also within project communities specifically. Finos, which has so many players based out of Europe, also in London, the UK. LF Europe comprises all European countries, not just the European Union. It's a strong financial services sector. I see terrific contributions coming out of Europe in financial services. I know that UBS Bank contributed a project to the FinTech Open Source Foundation last year. And that's an amazing role for a bank to play in open source, and a European bank at that. I happened to work at UBS for 5 years in an earlier part of my professional life. So it was really nice to see that it's not just the cloud service providers or the tech companies partnering with the banks, but the banks themselves contributing open source projects for the benefit of the industry. That's a new level of maturity. It's nice to see these initiatives coming out of Europe. NatWest is another bank based out of the UK. It's a retail bank, but joining the FinTech Open Source Foundation, engaging in cloud native KubeCon in London, and CNCF projects. It's just terrific. So, I mean, Europe represents 30% roughly of Linux Foundation members and contributors broadly, and they're certainly carrying their weight.
There's often a question, a murmur around should there be European open source, Chinese open source, or American open source, which will create a lot of friction and fragmentation. Did the report surface any sign of fragmentation, or was the emphasis more on global collaboration?
Yeah, I think it is widely recognized that nobody wants a fortress Europe. It makes no sense. It's the same. I think it might have been Gab in an interview with you, and forgive me if I'm wrong, who made the parallel to the scientific industry, the medical industry, looking for cures for disease. And you wouldn't only look among European researchers for advancements in the field. You would want to leverage the insight and the research that exists on a global scale and collaborate with the best minds on that kind of medical science discovery. That's the same thing for open source, recognizing that not all the talent lives within the European continent. Bringing the best ideas of the world together for the benefit of Europe is really the opportunity. It doesn't matter where the code comes from. It's what is Europe going to do with that code? That's the exciting part. The fact that it's free, the fact that it's open source, the fact that it represents high quality and an environment for information sharing and collaboration is really quite exciting. It's Europe's opportunity to do with open source what it can and what it will.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing the findings of this European-centric report. Now let's talk about the report that you folks have done on AI, because AI is one of the hottest topic these days.
Absolutely. Similar to the opportunity to accelerate European innovation is the opportunity to accelerate organizational innovation specific to AI through open source AI, likening artificial intelligence and generative AI in particular to a new general purpose technology, not unlike the World Wide Web and the internet, that all organizations are going to be using. Our report explored the prevalence of sovereign AI as a strategic organizational priority, whether that priority was taking place at the national level, the supranational level, or the organizational level, or some other kind of level, and why organizations were needing to create sovereign AI solutions. What was the motivation behind that? And to what extent was open source being leveraged in that activity? And why global collaboration through open source project communities was essential and very powerful, very strategic to helping organizations achieve their sovereign AI solutions. Now, a comment on what we're really meaning when we say sovereign. There are a lot of different motivations around the idea of sovereignty. Sometimes it's just as simple as needing to create a digital solution within a country that reflects country-specific data, national language, and the regulatory context for that country or region within a country. And so that's the opportunities, building better and more responsive and higher value AI systems, call them sovereign or call them bespoke or use another name, but allowing organizations to create more meaningful tools through open source AI, and therefore collaborating still at a global scale so that the ideas from perhaps other countries who have rolled out their own solution, somebody else can benefit from that. And so this report tested that hypothesis that open source was the accelerator to building sovereign AI solutions worldwide. And yes, it is a strategic priority. I think that the numbers of the study show that 79% of our survey takers from a wide collection of organizations all around the world view sovereign AI as a valuable and strategic priority, especially at the national level, but also almost half, 49% at the organizational level. So it's a thing.
Will you also be expanding this research to look at how different regions or countries are approaching AI? What is the scope of your AI report going forward?
There are many reports that we're conducting on this subject, Swap. And I think you and I spoke earlier this year about our global report on the economic and workforce impact of open source AI, which was commissioned by Meta. Since that report came out, we have been engaged to conduct regional studies into open source AI's economic opportunity. And just this week, we published the AI opportunity in Africa, the Middle East, and Turkey. We have begun production on a report specific to open source AI in Latin America. We are producing another report on the same topic for the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation economies. That will come out at the end of October, and are doing a similar study for Canada. So this type of activity, the prevalence of open source AI adoption in different regions to address pretty much the same type of theme as you were discussing, mitigating bias in AI systems, creating more bespoke, more responsive AI solutions, and using a country-specific data is relevant all over the world. And we're getting a better sense through research of to what extent countries are engaged in this activity, which industries are widely adopting open source AI, what's the value that's being reported in this activity for these economies. So great data. We're expecting a whole suite of reports by the end of calendar 2025, 6 unique reports in different regions to help round out this AI story. Beyond that, there's so many other topics to explore through research. We're also looking at launching a study next year measuring the impact of generative AI on software development, specifically both where it is helpful and where it's very costly in terms of overwhelming maintainers with AI generated code. Ultimately, we want to be able to help guide organizations in their use of generative AI when it comes to software development, to make it a more precise activity, to get more value from that activity, and to create less thrash.
You mentioned the study on Africa and Turkey. Can you share the thinking behind that report and some of the key findings?
Yeah, definitely. In our AI reports that we've worked with Meta on, the key question we want to answer through a literature review is understanding the economic opportunity. What are the GDP numbers? What are the growth projections for these regions through the adoption of AI broadly and open source AI specifically? For example, in the Middle East and North Africa region, AI adoption is estimated to produce 320 billion in economic value. And the United Arab Emirates represents the largest share of that, of 13.6%, followed by Saudi Arabia at 12.5% roughly, and Egypt almost 8%. Similarly, in Africa, looking at GDP estimates, a range of anywhere between 61 and 100 billion US dollar economic value annually, projected to reach 234 billion by 2030. So these are the kinds of numbers that are very exciting to policymakers in terms of encouraging talent communities to get the right skills in order to realize the opportunity that open source AI and generative AI holds for their region, for creating jobs, for creating growth, and for making a social impact as well. I think that the applications of open source AI and AI broadly are huge in terms of providing access to information through localizing tools in languages. Right now, English is the dominant language in AI. These solutions are providing language customization at a scale we've never seen before. So that's the nuance. It's both social good, but also economic good. Applications in healthcare being another example. Also helping alleviate some of the pressures on countries where there's a low birth rate. Some of the advanced economies have low birth rate, which means the aging workforce and the working age population is stretched between caring for elders and caring for young children, and hoping that AI can help make the productivity aspects of AI can help make the quality of life that much better in terms of senior care and in terms of the productivity of the people whose responsibility it is to care for those seniors, the children of of seniors and ultimately make life better in so many different ways. So those are the findings that we're looking forward to publishing so that governments can help make informed policy and prioritize resource allocation to nurture AI startups, the implementation of AI and AI services, and ensure that their teams that their populations are appropriately skilled.
Beyond the research itself, how do these reports help Linux Foundation identify where more support or engagement is needed, whether that's cultural, social, or community driven?
I think as we highlight the economic opportunities for regions all over the world and inspire a generation of leaders, a generation of coders to become more engaged in open source communities from whatever corner of the world they reside, that's a benefit to the Linux Foundation. That's a benefit to all of our project communities, that we have talent that comes from anywhere. All they need is a connection and the will to engage. So to expand our network of contributors to all regions of the world, I think is a net benefit for our members, for our project communities, and the whole open source ecosystem broadly, bringing as many voices to the table as we can, bringing as many ideas forward through code contributions as we can, I think is a win-win. And hopefully as more leaders in these regions that may have historically been underrepresented, either in terms of research findings or in terms of contributions, realize that there's a place in open source for them and that the time is now to get engaged.
Let's now talk about the commercial open source report. What was the idea behind it? And once again, what are some key findings?
So for a long time, open source was viewed as a bad business model, and that open source licenses weren't seen as being compatible with profitability. And what's really exciting in this report is that we've looked at 25 years of data to show that open source and commercial interests really go hand in hand. The commercial open source is a well-established venture investment category, and that open source startups have received enormous amounts of funding as of late, particularly those at the cutting edge of AI. They're accounting for $9 billion worth of deals. And the idea behind this report was to dispel that myth that you don't need to necessarily have a license change in order to be profitable, that VCs should in fact be looking at making investments in startups that have an open source strategy, that are working with open source projects and building at the pre-competitive layer as a means to get to market faster and build that moat on top of the open source core and provide all kinds of business opportunities around that idea that takes an open source solution and builds something great with it. The report also shows that at exit, the commercial open source software companies have superior exit valuations in terms of IPO, 7 times higher and 14 times higher at the point of M&A. So that outperformance of cost companies came as a real surprise to our community members when we published these findings in Amsterdam in August. It was a great point for discussion to dispel these myths that, and particularly doing that in Europe, where small and medium-sized enterprises have an incredible opportunity to work with open source, get their projects to market, get their products to market as well, and compete globally, taking advantage of base layers that are open source and therefore free and widely available.
You folks have been doing these reports for a long time. What are there any other takeaways from the commercial open source finding that stood out?
There's one other point that the report brings forward in a novel way, and that's that is measuring the extent to which commercial open source software projects benefit from community growth after funding. And to the extent of I think it's 8 times more dependencies, 7 times more package downloads. And that's as well as a jump in GitHub stars. So community engagement and commercial open source are highly compatible, that one doesn't negate the other, that communities thrive when projects and commercial open source businesses are funded. It's a net positive. And I think that part of the story we were able to bring forward in this report with Serena and CASA through work using the OpenSSF's criticality score and bringing in insights from the Linux Foundation to explore community metrics from open source, from commercially funded open source projects. And together, it's a great story.
Finally, let's touch on the OSPO report. What was the focus this year, and what were some of the most important findings?
Yeah, I think our OSPO report showing some interesting trends, primarily the role of the OSPO to manage open source AI and manage generative AI risks. And that's up. That was up significantly over last year. So last year, that number was 65%. This year, it's 79% of OSPOs are engaged in AI issues. They've long been part of security issues, but increasingly, it's a dual role. So that's that additional support that the OSPO plays within an organization is strategically relevant today. It's a twofold approach. Yes, culture and engagement in open source project communities is huge for the OSPO. That's well understood. But the role of the OSPO in managing security risk and AI risk is a real business opportunity and a business responsibility. And that helps the open source value proposition, the open source foundation value proposition as well, because through engagement of projects, we see better opportunities for improving an organization's security posture. That we understood experientially, but the report that we published earlier this year on the Cyber Resilience Act, showing that the projects under the Linux Foundation that were already compliant with the CRA showed high levels of security culture and leadership and engaged companies who have well-established OSPOs, who are highly internetworked and are regularly contributing to open source project communities through projects and through their OSPO. That it has lent itself to making sure that these projects are trusted, are CRA compliant, and there's a lot to say about the OSPO's role in that context.
Hilary, thank you for sharing these insights. It's clear the research is not just capturing where open source is today, but where it's headed next. So thank you for your time today, and I look forward to chat with you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Swap.
And to our viewers, if your company is navigating challenges around open source, AI, or commercial adoption, we'd love to hear how you are approaching it. So don't forget to reach out to our team, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more conversations right here on TFIR. Thanks for watching.